presentation of the day is one I know we all look forward to hearing. Please join me in welcoming Miranda McAuliffe for newborn screening legislative update and foundation updates.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Okay. So for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Miranda McAuliffe. I'm very proud to give this presentation today on behalf of ELISA and the ALD Alliance. The first time I spoke at this conference was in 2018 as a first-time new parent. So I want to give a special thank you to the families that are doing that this year. I never would have thought in 2018 that I would be here giving this presentation, so I just want to give a special thank you to all of you because you guys are really lending a voice to that next generation of people who haven't found yours yet. So really, thank you for sharing your story. We really, really appreciate it. I'm also a newborn screening mom of an asymptomatic 8-year-old boy who is hopefully acing his spelling test right now and will be delivered by my husband hopefully by lunchtime and is very much looking forward to being here. I'm also a newborn screening daughter, which sounds kind of odd to say, but I do have a mildly symptomatic father who was also diagnosed due to newborn screening, and I'm a mildly symptomatic woman myself. I want to thank you all for being here today. I'd also like to thank everyone who's logging on from all different time zones from Zoom, especially those of you logging on super early to hear this. Thank you. I want to give a special thank you to our board members also who we got to spend some quality time with last night. So that's Dr. Raymond, Dr. Regelman, Dr. Malak, and Dr. Bolins, who is very busy day in clinic, but is logging in on Zoom, and also Kristen Fowler, who was here yesterday. We want to thank you for helping to curate this content and just the guidance and support you provide all year long. We truly appreciate everything that you do for this organization. I want to thank Ori and the Ace Hotel for the accommodations. Everyone's having a wonderful time. And of course, I want to say thank you to our sponsors. There we go. Bluebird Bio and Minarx Therapeutics. Same thing, we could not have this meeting without your support and the support of our programming throughout the year, so thank you for that. Okay, so we saw this map a few times yesterday, but there's a lot of green, right? So that's a good thing. And then I think this visual speaks for itself. I'm not gonna go through every single state, but obviously this amazing progress wouldn't be possible without the local advocates on the ground that come to these meetings and bare their souls and testify about what they've been through. As I'm looking at some of the families, I'm seeing the Finn family, and I'm reminded that I have to thank Courageous Connor for my earrings today, which gave me a little bit of courage as I was practicing my slides this morning, so thank you. And then in terms of what it's looking like ahead. So 42 states now screening all babies, full population for ALD. Of the 8 states remaining, we're estimating 5 to begin screening by the end of this year. So Louisiana, thank you. We had some great representation from the lab in Louisiana on Wednesday at our consortium, reaching out for some assistance with other labs in the country that are using similar methods. So more than likely they will be starting by the end of this year. Montana, so with many of the states, there's a rulemaking process that has to move forward before screening can begin in the lab. Montana, if they're not done with rulemaking yet, I think it's just one signature left, which we were assured would happen by the end of this month. And they're already sending out public communications saying that they're planning on starting this year, so that's a really good thing. Nevada also working very hard in the lab. They're anticipating sometime this summer to go live. South Carolina is currently working on validation for their second tier and reaching out to a local reference lab for the third tier molecular testing of the ABCD1 gene. So they said they should have more updates for us by the end of spring. And then South Dakota, one more public meeting on April 15th for the bill to go into law, and then they're hoping that they will be able to start screening soon after that. So really, really exciting, and this presentation may be a lot shorter next year, which isn't a bad thing. So, of the 3 remaining, we have Alaska, Massachusetts, and North Dakota. Alaska, in 2022, added SMA to their panel, which is another condition that's on the recommended uniform screening panel. Concerns expressed about having to raise the newborn screening fee, so they haven't been able to give us an estimated timeline yet, but it is on their radar. I'm going to skip Massachusetts and go to North Dakota, and then I'll go back to Massachusetts. So there's a timeline there that you should be able to see. So for 2024, North Dakota is really working on MPS 1 and Pompe, which are 2 other conditions that are on that recommended panel, which makes sense, and we're so excited for that. Pompe was added to the RUSP, I think, a year before ALD, and from what I understand, MPS 1 and Pompe play nice together in the lab. Where are my lab people? Yes, similar equipment, so that totally makes sense. And obviously, we will stay in touch with them, and if there's any public meetings that we can attend and help coordinate testifying to advocate for ALD, we will be there in the future. And then Massachusetts. So this is from their website, and you can see that, so they have an opt-in pilot. And it's, every baby gets their regular state panel screened, but then they are asked soon after delivery, the parents, if they would like to opt in to be screened for 4 additional conditions on the RUSP. ALD is one of them. The pilot just turned 5 years old. And we don't really, as a community, I think, know too much about what has come from that. And I think humbly it's okay to ask kind of where we are. We did reach out and heard back from one of the directors that didn't share too much information, but that I think there were 11 males being followed. But we kind of decided with this 5-year mark that we wanted to do some kind of a formal outreach, just asking for more information. So we have drafted a letter on behalf of the ALD Alliance that we'll be sending out soon after this conference. We've collected testimony from some Massachusetts residents, so if you are here and you would like to add your thoughts or experience as a clinician, we're happy to include those in the letter. So going to move on from there. And this quote, I think, is really what the heart of our mission is all about. And it's not ALD specific, right? It's just the idea that a bridge or a state line should not be determining the health of your child. And in many times it is a situation where, depending on your zip code, you are getting that diagnosis at birth, you are getting access to life-saving monitoring, to treatment if needed. And if you're on the other side, you're suffering a diagnostic odyssey, which is going to lead to disability or death. And it truly is death by zip code, as Elisa has always called it. And it's a broken system, and we want to do everything we can, not just at this state-by-state level, but from a bigger picture too, which is why we also, as an organization, advocate at the federal level. And it's, we're ALD is in the final straightaway of this marathon, right? This is really no longer about us. We're looking forward to other conditions that were either just added on the RUSP or, the MLD community just getting that amazing FDA gene therapy approval. We don't want them to go through this, having to go state by state. It really, there just needs to be a better system, and I think we can all agree to that. So what we've kind of latched on to as our gold standard of how we're going to decide how we're going to advocate at this level is through the RUSP. And I mentioned it earlier. It stands for the Recommended Uniform Screening Panel. So it's a list of disorders that the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services recommends for states to screen as part of their state universal newborn screening program. So the key word here is recommend. It's not a mandate. But like I said, for us, it's the best gold standard for us to decide on what we're going to lend our help to. ALD was added to the RUSP in 2016, and there's technically 4 other conditions on the RUSP that are not being implemented yet in all 50 states. So I try to do this every year too, just some updates from the last time we met as a group. So GAMPS was added to the RUSP in January of 2023. They're a lot like us, this organization. They keep up to date with the newborn screening maps, and they're constantly updating their social media when a new state starts screening. So it's been fun to follow along with them and cheer them on. There's currently 4 states that are screening for GAMPS. SMA recently reached all 50 states in screening, which is amazing, great news. And then this is a little snapshot of the Hunter's Hope announcement of finally them getting their majority vote for this to be added to the RUSP CRAB-A, which was so amazing and a long time coming. Them too, they're technically 1 signature away from being there, but we're just so excited for them and happy to help advocate alongside them. And I believe CRAB-A is currently at 12 or 13 states, something like that. So, okay. So for the last few years, when we've talked about what we're doing at the federal level to advocate, we've talked a lot about appropriations, which isn't a bill. You're kind of thinking line item in a bigger budget. And we've always felt that the best solution, and this comes from Elise's years of experience of working so closely with the labs, is for funding so that these programs can, around the country can implement these programs and that they'll have all the resources they need. Currently, it's a 10 or more year delay from when a disease is first added on the RUSP to be implemented in all 50 states. Obviously, this leads to inequality, healthcare disparity, and often death by zip code. There's been report after report that has studied this, and pretty much all stakeholders agree that one of the big problems, not the only problem, but one of the biggest problems is funding for states. The Every Life Foundation, the past few years, has been working on this RUSP alignment legislation. This isn't at the federal level, it's at a state by state, putting this in place locally. And, it's great legislation. It's created transparency. So it's created accountability so that a lot of states have taken this and now have a system in place where they're going to review the condition and check all the boxes. The only thing that's missing really is ensuring that the funding is needed there for them to do this. And we're seeing it in real time. I sit in on as many of these public newborn screening advisory committee meetings as I can. And most of them, they're so thoughtfully put together. I learned so much getting to listen in and watching their process. And it just breaks my heart when you have a condition that checks all of their boxes and then that last box is, can we implement? And a lot of times the answer is no, just because the resources aren't there. So, sorry, let me click over. So what are we doing about it? The Newborn Screening Saves Lives Act, which I think first came on the scene in 2008 and was last reintroduced, I believe, in 2021. This really wasn't just legislation, right, but it was this buzz phrase that I think tied the whole rare disease community together. If you knew anything, you were advocating for this because it really keeps newborn screening in motion, right? So just in terms of quality assurance in the labs and funding newborn screening research and pilot programs and all that. And the last year or so, you're not really hearing much about it. So I can't answer this question, is it a lost cause? But could do a whole other presentation on the politics as to why it is. What we've done in the last few years, in addition to advocating for Newborn Screening Saves Lives, is worked on appropriations for grant programs that are provided to labs to help them. So again, just feedback from everyone that we've worked so closely with was for the grant for the CDC program for labs and newborn screening programs to bring on a new condition. That is not being offered this year. but HRSA has stepped in with 2 grants called the Propel and Co-Propel grant. I know there are, newborn screen state programs in this room today that have worked on that. It's a lot of work, these grants to fill out, and they're already so busy. So what we're doing this year, behind the scenes, is drafting language for a bill that will not be ALD specific. The idea is to help for all RUSP-approved conditions. And then these are some of the things that we're just keeping in mind as we're working on the language. So obviously, it's always, the goal is to eradicate death by zip code, provide that steady stream of funding. And then even earlier on in the process, before the condition gets approved on the RUSP, there's a whole nomination process that really ends up falling on the shoulders of the advocacy organizations who are already overworked, and really just need more guidance in how to do this. The advocacy organizations many times are relying on clinicians and researchers donating their time to get these packages moving forward. And anyone that was following along with the CRAB-A process this last year, and following along with the Advisory Committee on the Heritable Disorders in Newborn and Children, we just think that there are some things where there could be more transparency, and like I said, just more help for the advocacy organizations that are just trying to save babies' lives. So that's really all I can share at this time. We haven't named the puppy yet or anything, but we are working on this bill behind the scenes. I do want to give a special thank you to Rose and Chris from Travere Therapeutics, who, they're really not even in our disease space. That they've really been our North Star for so many years working on this. They care so much about it, and I learned so much from them. Elisa always says to me, you have to remember this is like a game of chess, all this political stuff, and she loves it and is so good at it. And me, I just want to lay my king down and go play Twister. It's disheartening at times, but it is what it is in our country. And again, I just wanted to give a special shout out to them for helping us throughout this process year after year. Okay, so how can you help? Always reach out. I think at this point everybody knows how to get a hold of us, but these are our email addresses. Follow us on social media, and then subscribe for updates too through our website. Always remember too that even if you live in a state that is screening, it doesn't mean that you can't help, because when it comes to the federal level, a lot of times it's, that your local congressional representative may be serving on a certain committee that we need to be reaching out to. So if you're willing to help, please let us know. And when the timing's right, we will reach out to you. Just other advice too, I always encourage people, especially the families and advocates who are interested in this, to subscribe to your state's Department of Health website for updates. A lot of times there's little boxes you can check about what you might be interested in, whether it's health or nutrition. Newborn screening is usually one of those boxes. That's kind of how I self-taught myself all this. Like I said, I learned so much from sitting in on these meetings. I will warn you that the further up you go in government, you might get a little bit more frustrated as you climb up, but that's okay, because it's just going to motivate you to continue advocating. And if you're not sure how to find those meetings, let us know, because sometimes it is a little difficult, but we're certainly happy to help you find it. So before, I really have 2 presentations in one, so I just want to stop there first just to see if there's any questions about the legislative stuff before we move on to our programming. Yes.
So I just want to bring up one thing. I'm not sure how aware you are or other people. I know some states are very aware of lawsuits that are being...
Yes. That's that other presentation that I could do a whole half hour on.
We're going to do that one next?
No. Please.
So
please share.
New Jersey is currently being sued by a class actions lawsuit. I can't talk too much about it, but basically parents who feel like their rights are being violated, basically on retention of blood spots beyond the period needed for testing. And so New Jersey's being sued currently. Texas has been sued. So parents, some of these parents who feel like their rights are being violated are wanting us to destroy blood spots immediately after testing is complete. And if that happens, it's going to cripple our ability to add on new disorders. So Dr. Orsini was talking about how validating ALD was really dependent on their ability to have dried blood spots from confirmed cases. If you don't keep samples for beyond 2-3 weeks, you're not going to have that resource. So, and we're spending so much time on this, and this, so it could cripple us. And I don't know how that can be added to the bill. That, I mean, and in our state law, it says that we, part of it is to be able to perform quality assurance. And that requires that we have samples that we keep, I mean, I feel like a minimum of 2 years. So anyway, I think these guys are going to be kind of marching through the different states, and other states are going to be experiencing this.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so let me give a little bit of background just in case there's new parents that are logging in from Zoom. So the newborn screening test takes place. There's the little heel prick that happens, drops of blood placed on a card, and what we always, new to newborn screening, you think, oh great, okay, my baby's being screened for all these diseases, but there is a second life beyond that card. It is de-identified, but then as just brought up, it can be stored in the lab. Every state has a different retention policy on how long they're storing them, and then it can be used for research to help validate new conditions. So, right, without these dried blood spot cards, basically newborn screening research would just be at a standstill, and it is a big part of the reason why newborn screening saves lives reauthorization did not move forward. So thank you for bringing that up. I don't know, Elisa, if we should talk about, do you want to talk about that? Because I know that was, because we are just as concerned.
So I'm sure, as you know, that happened in Michigan as well. There's a lawsuit. So Franny, I'm not sure if she's here, but we submitted an amicus brief in support of the Department of Health in Michigan, because that's what's happening there, and they want all the blood spot cards to be destroyed. But in my mind, I think the parents are just not educated about what's happening. It's not like we're taking the blood spot cards and using it for something. It's de-identified. It's used, obviously, for validation. It could be used maybe for therapies in the future. So we're trying to work towards that, because if that lawsuit does happen, obviously it's going to affect everyone across the country, New Jersey and the other states that's happening. I don't have an update on that, but that lawsuit has been going on for several years now. So we hope that getting more people involved and hearing the voices, that won't happen.
Thank you. Any other questions before I move to the second part? Okay. Thank you. Okay, I know Dr. Van Haren showed this briefly yesterday, but for anyone who wasn't here yesterday, I promised we'd give a quick shout out to ALD Family Weekend. They will be having, this is not one of our events, but I did get to go and experience this as an ALD family last summer. It was just, we had an amazing time. My son cried as we were driving away from the camp. So it's free to families. You just have to get there. They're very active on social media. They have a website where you can put in your application. So I always encourage families to get out to whether it's ALD Family Weekend or a conference. Like I always say, it's tough as you're processing a diagnosis in the beginning, and I know me myself, I kind of sat on the sidelines the first 2 years, but there's so much love waiting for you at events like this. So please take advantage of them. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Oh, I didn't see you. I'm sorry. Hi,
That's
Amy.
okay. So I actually have a comment too. We at APHL are working on draft model legislation for states to try to protect some of this dried blood spot stuff. So hopefully we'll have something coming, especially around things like law enforcement use and other issues. But my question, Miranda, is I know right now HRSA has a request for information out. looking at or allowing the public to comment on the review process for RUSP nomination. Are you all planning to respond to that?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. That's an open tab on my browser for Monday once the conference comes to a close. But yeah, and you know what? As soon as I get back to my laptop too, I'll put that link in the chat for people that are on Zoom. But the answer is yes. So we have our own kind of RUSP coalition that's not just our advocacy organizations, but a few others. Like I said, Chris and Rose from Trevere, and that's first thing on our agenda. The next time we meet is to kind of put something formal together as a group. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so now for our foundation programming updates. We already talked about newborn screening advocacy. I'm going to go over our care package program, our Footprints project, and our New York ALD outreach project. And I'm going to start with the care packages. So these are some of the recipients of the care packages over the years. I'm going to do a little show and tell. So the way this works is we have a submission form on our website under newborn screening. So if a family gets this diagnosis, doesn't know where to turn, they just fill out their contact information. We reach out to them and try to get this package out within a week. And they are getting the Parents Guide to ALD. So this was put together a few years ago. I think we unveiled this at the 2020 conference. It's just a parent-friendly version of the published monitoring guidelines that are already out there by a lot of the brilliant minds in this room. They will also get this guide that was really written by parents for parents, so coping with an ALD newborn screening diagnosis. We worked on this really in the thick of COVID when we couldn't all be together at meetings like this. So we had a lot of our parents come together on Zoom. We got a lot of help from Dr. Pierpont at the University of Minnesota, just kind of keeping us all on target and helping these families through this, what we call living in the 6-month cycles and what it's like to experience that, and the blood work and everything that kind of goes along with that. So we have that for them. A book favorite in our house, The Donut That Roared, A Child's Guide to Surviving an MRI. We read this before every MRI in my house. It was written by a teenage patient, not ALD, but someone who also needs to undergo frequent MRIs, and his aunts. And it's been so helpful, especially I hear from parents who say, yes, I'm putting this aside for when my babies can read, but there's also older siblings that don't really understand what's going on, and that this has helped them process and understand why these MRIs are needed. This is Philbin. So he's an MRI-safe teddy bear that the boys can kind of hold on to while they're in the scanner. And then our signature Hope onesie too. Okay. So I have the privilege of putting these packages together. It's one of my favorite things to do. I went in the back end of the website a few days ago just because I wanted to have the right stats, to see how many packages we'd sent out, how many states we're in. And I didn't format it right, so it was just raw data. And one of the categories was timestamp of when this came in. And I can't tell you how many requests we get between 1 and 3 o'clock in the morning. And I get chills just thinking about it, because I know so many of us in this room have been that parent or that advocate that's Googling things at that time, searching for any answers. So it really is just so comforting to know that these families are finding a place that they can turn to and have, the tools they need delivered right to their door. And that, if they are dealing with a local team and maybe can't get to an expert center, they at least have resources that they can bring their doctors to. So we love this program, and we're so thankful for the support that allows us to do this. Yes.
About those 5 states or 4 states that do not screen, I presume they're not just being resistant. I presume
Oh,
they have
not
a
at
reason.
all.
No, but do you have any data? Because I think the way to approach it is to help those states get to where they are. I mean, I know in Florida we've sometimes found ourselves on the other side of parent groups because we were trying to do it correctly. And it's not just flicking a switch, it required sort of infrastructure funding or whatever. But it would be nice to see why they're not. What are the reasons to understand newborn screening?
Yeah, so like there's a rulemaking process, and it starts there. So sometimes that can take a while. I truly, just as a member of the audience, I loved Vicky's presentation yesterday from New Jersey. Those first 2 minutes where we got to follow along her timeline of what I'm going to be sending that to parents, and I'm going to say, look, you don't have to watch the whole thing. It's great, but even if you just watch those first 2 or 3 minutes, because it really shows in real time all the steps that are involved, and the constraints that the labs face. It's an underfunded program. It's one of the most successful public health programs, I think, of our country's history, but it's underfunded. They just don't have the resources they need. So no, there's really not much resistance at all. I mean, it is there, in a very few select places, but no, it's really more funding constraints, and that's why we are advocating at, not just at the state level, but the federal level for that funding.
Shouldn't your group actually be helping those states get the funding? Because the bad thing would be if those states, if you go to the legislatures and they say, yeah, turn the switch on, and they're not ready and they're doing a poor job because they're just not ready. So I would have liked some data on those 4 states and say, where are they? Are they going to be ready next month or next year, or they've thrown up their hands, or they're not doing anything? Just some data individualized so we have. I can't hear you. Yeah, but right. No, that's the example. But I'm saying that if we had sort of a real life example would be to have those 4 states and to have a comment from those why they don't. Is it, and so just to understand how to get there. I think she's right that it's funding usually, you're absolutely right, but then we should be fighting the legislatures because, it's, again, the worst scenario would be if they start, they don't have funding.
Right. Well, I know what Elisa's going to say, so I'll let her say it.
No, we understand that states, even if they got $10 million today, that they can't start tomorrow. We definitely understand that. What we're saying is funding is usually the primary reason why they can't move forward. So we're not saying here's 10 million, start tomorrow. We're saying when they are ready and the systems are in place, they can't move forward because they don't have the funding to do so. So that's why we're advocating for that on a national level, because this is not an ALD problem. This is a newborn screening program problem.
But I get to hammer that home. If you had those 4 states and you say they're not doing it, why? It would be nice to have data, funding, or not ready, don't have a lab. I mean, whatever the reasons are, to make us understand why this really has to be done at the money level, because they would be glad, I'm sure, to do it if they had that funding. So I mean, if you just had this 4 states, and so comment on where they are. Are they planning to do it next year? Are they planning to do it never because they don't have funding? Just as a.
So I did share. I mean, those 4 or 5 states that I listed, they are going to be starting this year, and I did share a little bit about that when I spoke. I'm happy to talk to you individually afterwards, but many of them are in validation process, and we're going to hear from Katie Becker now too.
I would just say that get in touch with Miranda, get into the momentum and the sync of this, and she'll help you do that and answer those questions. There's another way of looking at this, though. We're looking at, say, there's 5 states that aren't screening. Massachusetts, pretty big state. The others are pretty small, population-wise. So in terms of babies screened, I don't know what that number is. Probably 92, 93, 94% of all babies are screened. So you need to celebrate that too, while you're finishing that off. But do support national legislation and state legislation, and those of you in public health labs, you can support that too. You are a tax-paying citizen, so make sure you're involved in that too. Good job.
Okay. Can I just ask one question? So first I want to say, from Massachusetts, I think the big question with that is what percentage are not being screened because it's a pilot? Because it's not, I mean,
I can answer that.
Massachusetts, I just want to and I'm not like defending Massachusetts, but there are babies that have been caught in Massachusetts. There are kids that have been saved. So it's not that no one is being tested. But my other question, my bigger question, which I'm guessing the answer is going to be no, is it seems to me like one of the problems is this idea that each state is coming up with their own way of doing it, and where for ALD there is time, right? It's not like you need to have it with Krabbe in 48 hours or whatever. If you didn't get it for 2 weeks, that would be fine. It just seems like kind of silly that each state does that independently, and then each one gets to kind of work through those mess ups before they, because I think my guess would be some states, part of the problem is that you do have states where you had these really low cutoffs, and then you had all these patients, and now you have all these VUSs that had very borderline. And so if it was more standardized, which I think, not to be political, but I think the U.S. is against oftentimes the standardizing it across states, but it seems like that would, I don't understand why that isn't the way to standardize it across the states, because that way you could avoid, it seems like otherwise you're just having every state reinvent the wheel, not completely, but with these cutoff levels.
I mean, that's why we have the roundtable meeting, because the states are so different and they all use different methods. Some use a kit, some do it in-house. I mean, Joe could probably speak more to this, but yeah, I wish it was more even around, but that's why we talk about cutoffs, we talk about other issues that they're having with the testing. And then as far as Massachusetts, I mean, yes, of course, babies are being picked up, but in my mind, when is the worst time to ask a woman to do anything? Maybe right after she's had a baby. And of course, we're missing kids. It should just be population. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what the... I think it's probably a high percentage. I mean, I don't know what that number is.
I have a
but-
number I can share. So the director that I reached out to said 90%, which is truly amazing. I mean, this was an
90% do it or don't?
uptake.
I don't
consent to it.
believe that, though.
Well, so
I
this
don't
is my
believe that
point, right? So this was an informal email response that I received, right? It's the pilot's 5 years old. Like I would like some kind of more formal communication on. First of all, how did you achieve that? That's amazing, because I
So
think
I
there's
think
other
that
pilot
it's-
programs that can learn from that. And then, right.
Because we know that babies that are born into state custody are getting it. So there's some easier, like there's I believe it.
I just feel like after 5 years and knowing that the test works, and we have caught, I think it's 11, you said, 11 boys, we've checked all the boxes. So after 5 years, isn't it time to now go population-wide and make sure we're not losing any families? That's the question.
And if
we're
not, why,
doing
then
that.
prove it to us. That's how I look at it as.
They pride themselves on this idea that they are, from my understanding from what they've said, is that they pride themselves on this idea that it's, that they start with a pilot, and this, I don't know if it's, I think it's a, I think, maybe Joe knows, that it's a,
Yeah, I think Massachusetts, just so you know, I mean, they've been traditionally doing this kind of pilot approach since, even when mass spec testing first came about in the early 2000s, they had their mass spec piloting for years. And the pilot is what's known as an opt-out pilot, which means the family has to say they do not want the screening for the supplemental part of whatever that's not on their panel for everybody. So yeah, and I think she's the idea that they're proud of it. I mean, what they're trying to do is protect you know, now these days with the public interest and everybody's war against saving blood spots and the government's in your DNA and all this stuff, they're trying to protect that side of it with, you know, I'm just giving the answer. I'm not defending it or anything like that, but this is how I understand it. And so their idea is that they're going to protect, and let's see what the public says about opting in. And it does mean they miss people. Generally, they've been at a 99% rate, so I'm a little surprised it's 90%. So I don't know if that, you know, I mean, I've heard their opt-out rate is like 1% of the population opts out of supplemental testing, but that was, you know, more a few years ago, so I don't know if it's changed. As far as kind of this idea of public health labs and how fast they can add conditions, I can tell you that you can want to add something. Like we would like to add MPS 2. It's $750,000. We have to get it budget passed. The RUSP, you know, the idea that anything on the RUSP you get funded for might help in certain instances. New York tries to get the funding. We'll see if we get it. Every state's kind of different. Some states, they have to buy new mass specs. Some states don't have the right people to implement the test. The second tier test for ALD is somewhat challenging for newborn screening labs. So a lot of them, that's the reason they don't add it, because you got to add HPLC, and most labs haven't done that before. So there's like a million, not a million, there's probably about 5 reasons why. And money is one of them. People's another of them. Space can be one of them if you need to buy more instruments. So there's this, you know, if you ask any given lab, it's probably one of these few things. And they're a big hill to climb for that particular lab. So anyway, just wanted to give the newborn screening idea as far best I know it.
Thank you, Joe.
One other issue, I think, when they talk about timing of how long this takes is, I know it was a problem in Kansas that a lot of states are facing capitation limits for the funding that's going into newborn screening. So there's a lot of advocacy work going on in terms of hopefully reducing those capitation limits or removing them, because a lot of that funding is also going into follow-up, which, as we know, without follow-up for newborn screening, that's essential to have that. And then another problem that was expressed in terms of getting the lab staff, because they're being recruited by private industry, and at least in Kansas, the lab staff there expressed it's a very special type of person that works in a newborn screen lab, and particularly post-pandemic as well.
Thank you, Kirsten. Okay. Thank you for that thoughtful discussion. Next time I'm going to pause. No, but really, I mean, this is why we talk about this, because there's a lot of good insights and ideas in the room and the perspectives from each state as well. So thank you. Okay, so really quick, because I know I'm behind schedule now, just 2 other programs that we're going to be working on this year that I want to discuss. So the ALD Footprints Project is what we're calling it. This is something that in a way has kind of always existed through the Newborn Screening Consortium. You know, initially we were meeting just once a year at this meeting, and then as more states came on, finding value in this, we, I guess within the last 2 years, moved to a quarterly consortium meeting on Zoom 3 times and in person once a year. So this is a multi-program collaboration. There have been some state-specific publications on the newborn screening experience in that particular state, but it's really just one snapshot of what may be happening at a given time. And we want to make ourselves as available to the amazing ALD researchers and investigators that are in this room and abroad. And we want to help them in the projects that they are working on. So we came up with the idea of this footprints database. Really what it is just a spreadsheet, and I think building it was probably the hardest part. I know we've gotten so much help from Dr. Joe Orsini and Dr. Kemp, also Tori Kay in Minnesota, that epidemiology brain. I mean, we really just wanted to make this spreadsheet functional, and so that whatever type of research you're doing, you can find the data you're looking for when it comes to following these ALD newborn screening cases and then how they're presenting. So obviously this is de-identified, grew from the consortium. the way we want to build it, I mean, this is really in its infancy. We've only met with a few states one-on-one, because we're not doing this on the consortium's time. We are going to meet with them individually. And once there's a significant pool there, we will develop a process where anyone, any qualified researcher who's looking to use this data can apply through the foundation and access all of this. And like I said, our hope is just that it will help with some of the amazing research that's going on. And then lastly, this is the last slide, I'm going to talk about the New York ALD Outreach Project. So as we announced yesterday, ALD newborn screening turned 10 years old on December 30th of 2013. And we wanted to celebrate that. So it's 157 babies that have been found in that time. And, anecdotally, Elisa and I have said this to ourselves, and then it even came up with our board members yesterday who have seen patients in New York, kind of, where are they all? Like we get outreach from so many places around the country, not as much from New York patients. So what we decided to do was to reach out to the 10 metabolic centers in New York. So they're the ones that are getting that referral from the lab of a positive baby. We want to sit down with them and kind of see what we can learn from each other. So number one, are you aware of all the resources that we have? Are you taking advantage of them? And then what barriers are you as a clinic seeing when it comes to having to follow these babies? And I think we'll probably learn a lot from this tour. I'm really looking forward to it. As Elisa said yesterday, unfortunately, we know of at least 2 cases where the child eventually developed cerebral ALD, but was lost to follow-up, and then unfortunately became too late for treatment. And we realized that we can't save everyone, but we want to do whatever we can to kind of see where the gaps may be. So I do want to give a special thank you because we started this outreach prior to the conference, and wow, I'm already hitting 10,000 steps. Is that possible? No, I'm not even moving. I don't know what that is, sorry. It's too early for that. And I lost my train of thought. So yeah, so we did this outreach for this program before the meeting, and there were so many New York clinicians that we reached out to that, we're not going to wait for the spring, we're going to come to you, and came to this meeting. So thank you so much. We're really looking forward to sitting down with your team and seeing what we have to learn. This is, across all disciplines, so we're going to be meeting with the neurologist, the endocrinologist, the geneticists, dietary, whoever's involved in following. We're really looking forward to it. And wouldn't it be wonderful, funding permitted, and we would love if we could replicate this in all states in the future, right? I do want to give a special thank you to the Ponce de Leon Foundation, who sponsored this project. So they're affiliated with a local New York bank in the Bronx that reinvests 80% of its assets directly into the community. 2 powerhouse New York women, we've been working on this. It was a very competitive grant process, and we're so happy that they saw something in us. So again, we appreciate their support, and we're looking forward to these lunch and learns. And we have our first one scheduled actually with the Northwell team, I believe on April 17th. So if we don't have you on our calendar yet, that is also on our to-do list for Monday. And that's it. Thank you so much. Any questions about the programming?